You know how people talk about heartbreak like it's this clean, dramatic moment? Like something snaps, you fall apart for a while, you cry it out, you heal, and then life slowly slides back into place. Betrayal doesn't feel like a single break. It feels like a collapse, quiet, internal, and hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived it. It cuts deeper than anything you can point to, deeper than any bruise you can show. It doesn't leave a visible mark, but it leaves a burn that spreads under the surface. It doesn't show up on a scan, but it settles in your chest like a stone you didn't choose to carry. And somehow you're expected to keep walking like nothing happened. That's what makes betrayal so brutal. It's invisible to everyone else, but it's loud inside you. A broken bone comes with a cast. A wound comes with stitches. Even grief, in some strange way, has a cultural script. People know what to say. People bring flowers. People give you space. There's a timeline everyone expects. Take a few weeks. Give it time. You'll feel better soon. But betrayal doesn't come with a timeline. There's no calendar for it, no guarantee, no neat moment where you can say, okay, that chapter is officially done. Sometimes it fades in months. Sometimes it stays for years. And sometimes, this is the part nobody wants to admit, it never fully disappears. Not because you're weak, not because you're dramatic, but because betrayal doesn't just hurt you, it rewires you. It doesn't only change how you see the person who did it, it changes how you see the world. Before betrayal, trust can feel like a natural thing, like breathing. You don't even think about it. You just give it to the people you love, the people you respect, the people you let close. You assume the ground is solid because in your mind it should be. The room feels different, conversations feel different, promises feel different. You start noticing tone, you start noticing pauses, you start noticing what people don't say. It's like your nervous system becomes a detective you never hired. Even when nothing is happening, you're scanning for signs, not because you want to be paranoid, but because your body remembers the cost of being wrong. And then there's the worst shift of all, the one people don't talk about enough. Betrayal doesn't just make you stop trusting them, it makes you stop trusting yourself. At first, you're shocked by what they did. You replay it like it can't be real. You go over the facts again and again, like your brain is trying to solve a math problem that doesn't make sense. But sooner or later, the focus turns inward. The questions start creeping in. How did I miss this? Was I blind? Was I naive? Was I stupid for believing? And those questions don't just sting, they weigh you down. Because now, it's not only your relationship that got shattered, it's your inner compass. It's your ability to trust your own judgment. It's your confidence in your instincts. It's that quiet voice inside you that used to say, I know who I can trust. When betrayal hits, that voice goes silent for a while. Welcome back to Stoic Power Lab, your daily dose of timeless Stoic wisdom. And I'm not speaking from a distance here. I've lived through this. I've felt it. I've carried it. I've had someone I trusted, someone who knew my fears, my dreams, the raw parts of me I don't show the world, turn around and use those exact things like weapons. And when that happens, something inside you fractures in a way that's hard to describe. Because it's not just your faith in them that breaks. It's your confidence in you. And that wound is strange because no one else sees it. You can still go to work. You can still laugh at a joke. You can still post online like everything's normal. You can still make dinner, pay bills, answer messages. From the outside, you look fine. But inside, the foundation has shifted. You carry it in your posture. You carry it in your hesitations. You carry it in the way you reread texts before sending them. You carry it in the way you pause before sharing anything personal again. You carry it in the way your guard rises before your heart even has a say. And that's why betrayal hurts the way it does. Betrayal only comes from people you let close. A stranger can insult you. They can offend you. They can treat you badly. But a stranger can't truly betray you. Betrayal requires access. Betrayal requires trust. Betrayal requires proximity. Only someone who was allowed close enough to see the real you can break you in a way that makes everything feel unsafe. That will tell you this without sugarcoating. That's what makes it personal. Betrayal does not arrive wearing a warning label, but who they were. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on the door and say,
that you gave
"Hello,
them a place
I'm here
in
to
your
ruin
life.
your trust."
You
It
shared
comes dressed
time.
as normal. It
You
comes
shared
wearing
vulnerability.
familiarity. It comes
You
wrapped
shared
in
loyalty.
affection, shared history,
You shared parts
inside
of yourself
jokes
that
routine.
weren't meant for everyone.
It arrives looking like
And they
someone
didn't
you
just hurt
already
you.
know. They did it from a
Because
position
it often
you
isn't
gave
some
them.
dramatic villain.
So when it happens,
It's someone who
it doesn't
smiled
feel
at
like
you.
an injury.
Someone who
It
called you
feels like a
family.
violation. Someone who said,
And once that line
"I've
has
got
been
you."
crossed,
Someone
your
who
mind
looked you in
starts
the
doing
eyes
what
and made
minds
you feel
do.
safe
It tries
until
to
they
protect
didn't.
you.
And
tries
when
to
that
make
reality
meaning out of
settles
chaos.
in, it
It
changes
tries to
the way
prevent
you
it from
experience
happening again.
life.
That's
You
why
start
people
seeing
replay
risk
betrayal
where you
late
used
at
to see
night.
comfort.
You
You're
start
not
seeing
replaying it
danger
because you
where
enjoy
you used to
suffering.
see
You're
closeness.
replaying it
You
because
start
your
seeing
brain is trying to
manipulation
rewrite
where
the
you
past
used to
with a
see
safer
love.
ending. Not because you're
It's
broken,
searching for the moment
because
where you
you've
could
been
have stopped
wounded.
it. And
The
the moment
wound
where you could have
changes how you
noticed the
move.
red flag.
But
The
here's
moment
where
where you could
Stoicism
have said
offers
no.
something rare.
The moment where you
Clarity
could have
without
walked away
illusion.
earlier.
Stoicism
And when you
doesn't
can't
tell you to
find that
pretend
moment
betrayal
clearly, you
didn't
start
matter.
blaming
It doesn't
yourself.
tell you to
You
minimize
start
it.
thinking,
It doesn't
if I was
tell you to
smarter,
slap a
I would have known.
motivational quote on top
If
of
I
it
was
and call it
stronger,
healing.
I wouldn't have tolerated
Stoicism
it.
teaches you to look straight at reality, even when reality is painful. Because the Stoics believe that denial is not peace. Denial is just delayed suffering. And betrayal is part of reality. A brutal part, yes, but still part of the human experience. People fail. People choose selfishness. People lie. People abandon values. People use others. People break trust. It teaches you to become prepared, not prepared in a paranoid way, prepared in a grounded way, prepared in a "my peace doesn't depend on your goodness" way. And that distinction matters, because a lot of people confuse Stoicism with being cold. They think being Stoic means you stop caring, stop feeling, stop trusting, stop loving. That's not it. You cannot control what someone else will choose. You cannot control whether they will stay loyal. You cannot control whether they will tell the truth. You cannot control whether they will protect what you shared in confidence. You cannot control whether they will do the right thing when temptation appears. But you can control what you do with the truth once it's revealed. That's the pivot point. Betrayal is the moment the mask slips. It's the moment reality becomes unavoidable, and the pain is real, but the clarity can become power if you're willing to confront it. It shows you what was real and what was performance. It shows you what was loyalty and what was convenience. It shows you what was love and what was dependency. It shows you what was character and what was image. And if you're brave enough to face that, you stop begging for someone to be who they aren't. You stop negotiating with reality. You stop fantasizing about a version of them that never truly existed. Not in pretending you weren't hurt, not in forcing forgiveness too early, but in seeing clearly. So if you've been there, if you know that sharp, silent weight in your chest, hear me clearly. You're not alone. You've been wounded. And wounds, yes, even deep ones, can become the exact places where strength grows. But only if you stop treating betrayal like something you should get over quickly. Only if you stop shaming yourself for still feeling it. Only if you stop making your pain mean you were foolish. Because being betrayed does not mean you were stupid. It means you gave trust. It means you hoped. It means you loved. It means you took a risk. The person who betrayed you made their choice. That part is on them. Your job now is something different. To rebuild your inner authority. To regain trust in your own judgment. To learn from the experience without being poisoned by it. To keep your heart wise without making it hard. To protect your peace without turning your life into a prison. And that's what we're going to do together. It's about becoming unshakable. It's about developing a mind so grounded in truth that betrayal doesn't destroy you. It teaches you. It doesn't turn you bitter. It turns you discerning. It doesn't make you closed. It makes you careful. It doesn't reduce you. It refines you. So if betrayal has been sitting heavy on your chest, if you've been carrying it quietly, if you've been questioning your own instincts, if you've been replaying the past at 2 a.m., if you've been wondering whether you can ever trust again, stay with me, because this isn't the end of your story. This is the moment you stop letting someone else's betrayal become your identity. And once you take that back, once you reclaim your inner compass, you don't just heal. You become the kind of person who can feel pain without being ruled by it. The kind of person who can love without losing themselves. The kind of person who can trust again, not blindly, not recklessly, but wisely. And that is the beginning of Stoic power. Section 2. Stoic clarity on forgiveness and self-respect. Because after the initial shock fades, You don't just feel pain. You start negotiating with yourself. You start bargaining with what you know. You start trying to make sense of something that was never meant to make sense in the first place. And that's where section 2 begins. Stoic clarity. Not the kind of clarity that's cold or detached, but the kind that refuses to lie to you. The kind that doesn't soften the truth just so you can stay comfortable. The kind that keeps you whole. See, most people treat forgiveness like it's automatically virtuous, like it's always the highest road, like if you don't forgive quickly, you're bitter. If you don't move on, you're weak. If you still feel anger, you're failing some moral test. But Stoicism doesn't work like that. Stoicism isn't a philosophy of looking nice. It's a philosophy of living true. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Not all forgiveness is noble. Not all forgiveness is healing. And not all forgiveness is even real. Fear of confrontation, fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of losing history, fear of being seen as too much for having standards. So they forgive, but their body doesn't. They forgive, but their nervous system stays tense. They forgive, but they don't sleep the same. They forgive, but they keep checking signs, reading between lines, bracing for impact. That's a ceasefire, and deep down you can feel the difference. Stoicism gives you permission to ask the question most people avoid. Am I forgiving because it sets me free? Or because it keeps them comfortable? Because that one question cuts through years of confusion. Let's be honest, betrayal creates a special kind of pressure. The world tells you to be mature. Your friends tell you to take the high road. Social media tells you forgive for yourself. The person who hurt you might tell you they've changed. They might cry, they might apologize, they might swear it'll never happen again. Not because you're foolish, but because a part of you still wants the old story back. The version of reality where you were safe with them. The version where your trust wasn't misplaced. The version where you didn't have to rebuild your entire emotional foundation from scratch. So you look for reasons to soften it. You start saying things like, they didn't mean it. They were going through a lot. I don't want to throw everything away over one mistake. And again, sometimes those statements can be true. But Stoicism teaches you to separate what is true from what is convenient. A mistake is when someone missteps, recognizes it, and corrects it. A decision is when someone sees the line and crosses it anyway. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." That's a powerful line, but notice what it implies. Marcus is talking about truth, about correction, about honest error. He's not talking about someone who knowingly chooses to break trust, someone who crosses a boundary with full awareness, someone who hurts you and then tries to wrap it in excuses after the fact, because that's not a mistake. That's character. And the Stoics were obsessed with character, not in a judgmental way, but in a reality-based way. To a Stoic, character isn't what someone claims. It's what someone consistently demonstrates when it matters. That's why Stoicism offers something most people don't want to face. You cannot heal by pretending. There's a difference between making peace and making excuses. Sometimes people say they forgive, but what they're really doing is denying. They're trying to skip the painful truth so they can keep the relationship, keep the routine, keep the comfort, keep the identity they built around that person. But denial doesn't lead to peace. It leads to delayed pain. Because the truth has a way of resurfacing. You might push it down for months, maybe even years, but eventually it leaks out. As anxiety, as resentment, as numbness, as distance, as constant suspicion. And then one day you realize you didn't really forgive. You just postponed the consequence. It says, look at what happened clearly. Name it accurately. Don't romanticize it. Don't minimize it. Don't decorate it. Because clarity is what sets you free. Now here's the hard part, the part that makes people uncomfortable. Sometimes forgiving someone means betraying yourself. That's not a trendy statement. That's a real psychological truth. If forgiving them requires you to ignore your intuition, silence your inner voice, or lower your standards just to keep things smooth, and the Stoics would never ask you to abandon your inner integrity. Because in Stoicism, the core treasure isn't other people's approval. It isn't comfort. It isn't even relationship itself. The core treasure is virtue, the integrity of your character, your judgment, your self-respect. That's the inner citadel Marcus Aurelius talks about, that inner fortress that cannot be purchased, pressured, or negotiated away. So when people tell you, just forgive, Stoicism adds a crucial condition. Forgiveness is only virtuous if it doesn't cost you your dignity. Because if it costs you your dignity, it's not forgiveness, it's surrender. And no philosophy worth living is going to tell you to surrender what makes you whole. Let's bring it down to reality. If someone betrayed you, and you immediately rush to forgive because you hate tension, because you're afraid they'll leave, because you don't want to start over, that forgiveness doesn't heal you. It just keeps the relationship intact at the expense of your internal stability. And the body always keeps score. Your mind might say, I forgive you. But your chest stays tight, your stomach stays unsettled, your sleep stays light. Your laughter feels forced because your system knows what your words are trying to outrun. That's why Stoicism doesn't glorify forgiveness as a performance. Stoicism cares less about what looks noble and more about what keeps your soul clean. They were interested in being good, and good, in their view, means living in alignment with truth. So the next question becomes, what is truth in betrayal? And some people are sorry because they got caught. Those are two different worlds. Truth is that some people make a mistake and change their behavior. And some people make a habit and only pause when consequences appear. Truth is that some people regret the pain they caused you. And some people regret that their image has been damaged. Stoicism teaches you to judge by actions over time, not by speeches in the moment, because betrayal often comes with emotional theater. Apologies, tears, promises, big declarations. I'll do anything. I can't lose you. I wasn't thinking. But Stoicism asks, what are they doing now? Are they rebuilding trust through repeated behavior? Or are they asking you to erase the consequences with a single word, forgiveness? Because real change is not a speech, it's a pattern. And this is where people get stuck. They confuse compassion with access. You can understand someone's pain, you can see their trauma, you can recognize their flaws, and still decide, you are not safe for me. It's possible to wish someone well and still keep your distance. It's possible to forgive someone in your heart, release the poison, and still never allow them back into your life. That's one of the most mature forms of strength. And seeing clearly is not bitterness. But being the bigger person becomes toxic when it means you keep shrinking so they can stay the same. If you're constantly absorbing disrespect, swallowing pain, and tolerating boundary crossing so that you can feel morally superior, you're not being bigger. You're being used. Stoicism teaches restraint, but not self-erasure. It teaches composure, but not self-neglect. It teaches peace, but not passivity. So yes, you can be calm, you can be measured, you can refuse to lash out. And sometimes, the most stoic thing you can do is not to argue, not to explain, not to beg for understanding. Sometimes the most stoic thing you can do is to walk away without apology. Because walking away isn't dramatic when the situation is already broken. Walking away is simply accepting reality. And if you've ever been in this situation, you know what I mean. People will try to guilt you into forgiving. They'll say you're holding a grudge. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you're throwing away something good. They aren't carrying your sleepless nights. They aren't the ones trying to rebuild trust with someone who proved they were willing to shatter it. Stoicism brings you back to the only question that matters. What protects your peace without betraying your self-respect? Because peace that requires you to silence yourself is not peace. It's suppression. Peace that requires you to ignore reality is not peace. It's denial. It's self-harm dressed up as forgiveness. And here's the deeper layer. Betrayal doesn't just test your relationship with them, it tests your relationship with yourself. Do you honor the part of you that knows what happened was wrong? Or do you override it because you want comfort? Do you listen to the voice inside that says, this isn't safe? Or do you silence it because you want to keep the familiar? This is why betrayal can become a turning point. Because if you handle it with clarity, you build self-trust. You rebuild your internal compass. You stop needing external validation to know what is acceptable, and that changes everything. Let me put it plainly. Sometimes forgiveness is freedom, and sometimes forgiveness is permission. Stoicism is not anti-forgiveness. Stoicism is anti-self-betrayal. Stoicism doesn't tell you to stay angry forever. It tells you to stay honest forever. And honesty sometimes means admitting the relationship you wish you had is not the relationship you actually have. Honesty sometimes means admitting they don't get access to you anymore. And access is the real currency. Not words, not memories, not history. Access. If someone's betrayal requires you to constantly monitor, doubt, overthink, and brace yourself, then the price of keeping them close is your peace. So if you're carrying betrayal and wondering whether to forgive, begin with this Stoic checkpoint. Are you forgiving to heal or to avoid discomfort? Are you forgiving because it sets you free, or because you're afraid of what happens if you don't? Are you forgiving because they've changed, or because you're hoping they will? Because hope is not evidence. Here's what you deserve: peace that doesn't require self-erasure. You deserve a kind of healing that doesn't depend on pretending the betrayal was smaller than it was. And if someone made betrayal a choice, not an accident, then the Stoic move is to stop debating your own worth. Stop over-explaining why it hurt. Stop bargaining with someone's character. Choose clarity. Choose boundaries. Choose the quiet strength of walking away if that's what protects your integrity. Because in Stoicism, the higher road isn't forgiving at any cost. The higher road is refusing to lose yourself just to keep someone else. And that is where real strength begins. Section 3. When loyalty is broken. Loyalty is one of those values people love to praise, right up until the moment it costs them something. It sounds old-fashioned when life is easy. It sounds like something you put on a quote graphic, something you say in a toast, something you claim in public because it makes you look solid. But the truth is, loyalty isn't proven when everything is convenient. It's proven when temptation shows up, when ego shows up, when there's something to gain by switching sides, when nobody's watching, when there's no applause for doing the right thing. That's why betrayal through disloyalty hits like it does. Because it doesn't just hurt your feelings, it rewrites your expectations of people. It makes you realize that what you thought was unshakable in someone was actually conditional. It forces you to look at a relationship and ask a brutal question: was this bond real? Or was it just comfortable? And when the answer is comfortable, the pain is different. It's heavier. It's not a simple argument. It's not a misunderstanding. It's the realization that someone you considered safe was willing to trade your name, your trust, your dignity for their own advantage. Now, here's where Stoicism gives you an edge most people don't have. Stoicism doesn't tell you to pretend it didn't happen. It doesn't tell you to wear a smile and call it growth. And it definitely doesn't tell you that forgiveness is automatically the mature move if it turns you into a smaller version of yourself. Stoicism teaches something more difficult and more freeing. See people clearly, and then act with dignity. So let's talk about what loyalty really is, why its betrayal cuts so deep, and why the Stoic response is not revenge, it's boundaries. Because a Stoic doesn't chase revenge, but they also don't keep giving access to someone who has proven they can't handle it. Loyalty isn't sweetness, it's integrity. A lot of people confuse loyalty with being agreeable. They think loyalty means always staying, always forgiving, always smoothing things over. But that's not loyalty, that's compliance. Real loyalty is moral, it's character. It's showing up the same way when it benefits you and when it doesn't. It's protecting someone's name when they're not in the room. It's not being close when it's convenient and then becoming a stranger when it's inconvenient. True loyalty is a kind of internal discipline. And when that discipline is missing, disloyalty doesn't just feel like abandonment, it feels like disrespect. It feels like someone took something sacred and treated it like it was disposable. And that's why the betrayal of loyalty hits deeper than people expect. Not because you didn't know people can be flawed, but because you believed this person wouldn't be. You believed they were built differently. Let me tell you a story that captures this perfectly. Anthony was in his early 50s. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't dramatic, he wasn't the kind of person who used the word loyalty every 5 minutes. He didn't talk about it because to him, loyalty wasn't a vibe, it was a foundation. Anthony believed in loyalty the way some people believe in gravity, quietly, fully, without needing proof every day, because he assumed it was simply part of being a decent man. And he had a best friend of over 20 years, not a casual friend, not a we grab coffee sometimes friend. I'm talking about a brother in everything but blood kind of relationship. The kind where you've seen each other at your best and at your worst. The kind where your families blend, where your kids grow up together, where holidays are shared, where funerals are endured side by side, where you stop thinking of your bond as optional because it's become part of your identity. And that's why what happened next didn't just hurt, it cracked him. One day, Anthony found out the truth. Behind his back, that same friend had been poisoning his name. Not once, not accidentally, not in a he was having a bad day kind of way. Whispered lies, twisted stories, subtle suggestions designed to shift how people saw Anthony. Little comments dropped into conversations, doubt planted in mutual friendships, the kind of social sabotage that doesn't explode, it spreads. And that's the part that hits your nervous system, because when betrayal is loud, you at least get clarity. But when betrayal is quiet, it messes with your mind. You start asking, how long has this been happening? Who knew? Who believed it? Anthony confronted him eventually, because betrayal always leaves a trail. And what did the friend do? He didn't own it. And Anthony felt something shift inside him in that moment, not just because his friend had betrayed him. See, betrayal is painful, but gaslighting afterward, the attempt to rewrite reality, is a second betrayal, because now they're not only hurting you, they're trying to make you doubt your own eyes. And in that moment, Anthony realized something that Stoics have understood for centuries. You can't argue someone into integrity. Character isn't something you talk into existence, it's something that shows up, or doesn't. The first instinct is to go to war. You want to expose them, shame them, destroy their image the way they tried to damage yours. You want to gather receipts. You want to call people. You want to set the record straight. You want them to taste what you tasted. But here's the trap. If you let betrayal drag you into revenge, you end up living inside their energy. Now your days are about them. Now your thoughts are about them. Now your identity becomes the person who was wronged. And that's how they keep taking from you, long after the betrayal happened. This is exactly where Stoicism offers something stronger than rage, self-governance. Most people read that and think it means be passive. No, it means don't let their behavior decide who you become. Because if someone betrays you and you respond by becoming petty, obsessed, cruel, or loud in the same way, you've just allowed them to rewrite your character. You've let their disloyalty infect your spirit. Stoicism says, protect your inner life first, not their opinion, not the crowd's reaction, not the social scoreboard, your inner life, the real battlefield, the internal war. Here's what betrayal really triggers: a war inside you. On one side, you have history, memories, loyalty you invested, the identity of we've been through everything, the fear of losing something that felt like family. On the other side, you have reality, the evidence, the pattern, the ache in your chest that knows the truth. Something essential has been violated. And that's where people get stuck. They start asking, do I forgive them? Do I salvage what used to be? Do I confront harder? But Stoicism gives you a sharper question than any of those. Is keeping them in my life aligned with my self-respect? Because here is the truth. Stoicism won't let you avoid. Sometimes forgiving someone who has shown you their character isn't compassion. It's self-abandonment. And if you forgive out of fear, fear of being alone, fear of losing community, fear of starting over, that isn't loyalty. That's betrayal of yourself. But it does teach boundaries. It teaches you to know where the line is and to mean it. A boundary is self-respect in action, a line that doesn't get redrawn. There's something important about deliberate disloyalty. Once it's revealed, you can't unknow it. You might patch things up, you might share a laugh again, you might even convince yourself it's fine. But the trust doesn't return to its original shape. It never does. And when that structure breaks, you can rebuild something new, but it will not be identical to what existed before. The creak remains, the doubt remains, the awareness remains. Because Stoics are realistic. They don't build their peace on fantasy, they build their peace on what is. So when someone shows you they are willing to betray loyalty on purpose, slowly, repeatedly, intentionally, Stoicism doesn't say, pretend it's nothing. It says, adjust your access. Antony's choice, peace over history. Antony didn't choose revenge, and he didn't choose denial. He chose clarity. He chose the hardest option for a loyal person, letting go. And he didn't do it in a dramatic explosion. He didn't scorch the earth. He didn't try to recruit an army of supporters. He didn't perform pain in public. He simply stepped back. Quietly. He stopped sharing with that man. Stopped showing up as if nothing happened. Stopped giving access to his life, his family, his energy. Not out of rage. Because Antony realized something that many people never learn. The absence of someone who disrespects your loyalty is better than the presence of someone who performs loyalty when it benefits them. And it's not cold, it's clean.
It's the kind of clarity that protects your nervous system from living in constant suspicion.
Because here's the real cost of keeping a disloyal person close. It's not only what they did, it's what you become while staying. You become a smaller version of yourself. You become someone who watches every word. You become someone who hesitates. You become someone who second-guesses every social interaction. You become someone who quietly absorbs stress so you can keep the peace. That's not peace. That's slow self-erasure. The questions you have to ask yourself. So let me turn this back toward you, because if this section is hitting hard, it's probably because you're not listening to a story. Who in your life crossed that line? Who made disloyalty a pattern, not a one-time slip? Who looked you in the eyes with a smile, then turned around and weakened you behind your back? Are you still holding on out of love or out of fear? Fear of losing history, fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of what people will think, fear of admitting you were wrong about them, because fear keeps people chained to betrayal. Not freedom as a slogan, freedom as a lived experience. Freedom from being controlled by people's choices. Freedom from being owned by your need for validation. Freedom from being trapped in relationships that drain your dignity. A Stoic accepts what's been revealed and responds accordingly, what not revenge actually means. Now, let's be clear. Choosing not to seek revenge does not mean you accept mistreatment. It means you don't let someone else's behavior turn you into someone you don't respect. And that's important, because revenge often feels like strength, but it usually keeps you tethered. Revenge says, you still control my emotions. Stoic boundaries say, you no longer have access to me. It doesn't require them to apologize. It doesn't require the world to agree with you. It's closure as a decision. Walking away, when it comes from clarity, is liberation. The Stoic lesson beneath the story. So here's the lesson section 3 is really teaching. Loyalty is sacred, and access is earned. When someone shows you they will trade your name for comfort, your trust for advantage, your dignity for their benefit, you don't work harder to prove your worth. You don't audition for basic respect. You hold the line, you protect your peace, you choose yourself without needing to hate them. Stoicism gives you the backbone to do that because it constantly reminds you your character is yours to guard, your peace is yours to defend, your self-respect is yours to keep clean. And when you choose clarity over history, you might feel loss, but you also gain something rare. You gain yourself back. You gain calm. You gain dignity. You gain the ability to sleep without replaying social chess games in your head. You gain an inner life that doesn't depend on whether someone else finally understands. And that is exactly what happened for Antony. He didn't win by humiliating his friend. He won by stepping out of the mess, not by wrestling inside it. He won by making the quiet decision that many people never make. My loyalty is not available to people who treat it like a tool. So if you're in your own Antony moment and you feel that internal war, part of you wanting to hold on, part of you knowing the truth, remember this. Stoicism isn't asking you to be cruel. It's asking you to be clear. No speech, no chaos. Just the quiet strength of choosing peace over betrayal. Is the moment you stop betraying yourself. Section 4. Deception and distorted reality. Deception is a special kind of betrayal because it doesn't arrive like a punch. It arrives like a handshake. It doesn't kick the door down. It knocks politely. It smiles. It hugs you. It tells you everything you want to hear. And while you're leaning into the comfort of that familiarity, it's quietly rearranging the furniture in your mind. That's what makes deception so dangerous. It doesn't just hurt you, it edits your reality. There are betrayals that happen in one obvious moment. An affair discovered, a lie exposed, a theft, a public humiliation. Those hurt, but at least they're clear. You can point to the moment and say, that's where it broke. Deception is slow, it's subtle, it's cumulative. It's the kind of betrayal that grows like mold in the walls, silent, unseen, until the structure is already weak. And by the time you recognize it, you're not just grieving what they did. You're grieving the fact that you were living inside a version of reality that wasn't fully real. That grief is heavy because it isn't only about them, it's about you. And that realization changes you. Deception doesn't just lie, it constructs a world. Most people think lying is just saying something false. But deception, real deception, is deeper. It's not just a bad sentence, it's a strategy. When someone deceives you consistently, they aren't only hiding facts. They're shaping how you interpret events. They're adjusting what you believe about yourself, about them, about other people, about what's normal. A pattern of deception can destabilize your mind. Because when lies are repeated, they start creating a false environment, a reality you live in, a story you operate from, a set of assumptions you make decisions with. And that means deception doesn't only hurt your feelings, it affects what you say yes to, what you tolerate, what you defend, what you blame yourself for. You don't just feel pain, you feel disoriented. That's why deception leaves people feeling crazy, not because they are crazy, but because their reality was manipulated. The kind of betrayal that whispers. There's a type of betrayal that doesn't explode, it whispers. It hides behind warmth. It uses closeness as camouflage. It's the partner who promises loyalty, but keeps secrets that slowly rot the foundation. It's the colleague who acts supportive while subtly undermining you. It's months of half-truths, years of omissions, a steady drip of small lies that over time create a world where you can't tell what's true anymore. And the most painful part? You usually sense it before you can prove it. You feel it in your gut, in the mismatch between their words and their patterns, in the little inconsistencies that you brush off because you want peace, because the lie is often more comfortable than the truth, until it isn't. Caesar and Brutus. Betrayal doesn't start with the knife. Think about Julius Caesar and Brutus. He ate at Caesar's table. He stood beside him. He shared private conversations. He was a friend, a confidant, someone Caesar likely assumed was safe. But the deeper betrayal wasn't the blade, because Brutus didn't wake up one morning and impulsively decide to betray Caesar. The betrayal started in backrooms, in whispered conversations, in hidden agreements, in fake smiles, in acts of omission, in loyalty performed in public while disloyalty was planned in private. The knife was simply the final scene. And that's how deception works in real life too. You're rarely betrayed out of nowhere. The betrayal is usually building quietly while you're still trusting loudly. When the mask falls, the self-doubt begins. Yes, you feel anger. Yes, you feel grief. Yes, you feel disgust. But the most haunting feeling is often the one that turns inward. How did I not see it? You start replaying everything. Conversations, texts, moments that felt slightly off. Those gut feelings you ignored because you didn't want to seem suspicious. And then you start questioning your own instincts. Not just, can I trust them, but can I trust me? That's the part deception steals, your trust in your own perception. Because once your reality has been manipulated, you start looking at your memories like they might be unreliable. You second guess yourself. You wonder if you're too trusting, too hopeful, too easy to fool. It creeps into new relationships. It makes you hesitate before opening up. It makes you analyze tone and timing. It makes you keep a guard up, even around people who haven't harmed you. Because your nervous system learned closeness can be dangerous. One of the most confusing forms of deception is when the deceiver looks kind. They aren't loud, they aren't obviously cruel, they're supportive. They check in, they know the right words, they appear consistent, but something never fully lines up. Maybe they make promises that quietly dissolve. Maybe they always have an explanation that sounds reasonable but never quite satisfies your gut. Maybe they present themselves as misunderstood while leaving a trail of confusion behind them. And if you're an empathetic person, you'll usually give them the benefit of the doubt. You'll assume you're overthinking, you'll assume you're being unfair, you'll assume their intentions are good because you want harmony and you don't like conflict, so you ignore the gut until you can't. Until the mask slips, until you discover the truth behind the scenes. They've been twisting information, manipulating perception, controlling narratives, protecting their image at the cost of yours. And when that happens, the shock is hard. But the deeper grief is this: you lose the version of yourself that trusted so freely. That's what deception kills. Not childish innocence, human innocence. The ability to relax into trust without scanning for threat. Stoic wisdom. Truth is the foundation of peace. This is where Stoicism becomes a lifeline, because Stoicism doesn't treat truth like a polite virtue. Stoicism treats truth like oxygen. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's not a quote for a wall. That's a rule for living. Because truth is what stabilizes the mind. Truth is what allows you to move through life without constant anxiety. So when someone lies to you repeatedly, Stoicism doesn't say, try harder to understand. It says, recognize what's happening. When someone chooses deception, they're deciding something that should make your spine straighten. They're deciding to control what you're allowed to know. It's why consistent deception feels suffocating, because you realize you're not in a relationship. You're in a managed environment. You're being fed a version of reality that keeps them safe and keeps you unsure. And uncertainty is the perfect condition for control. You don't beg for honesty from a deceiver. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to negotiate truth out of someone who profits from lies. They chase closure. They demand explanations. They plead for honesty. They try to reason with the deceiver like the deceiver is simply confused. But if someone's deception is consistent, it isn't confusion. It's choice. The Stoics were clear. Don't waste your life arguing with what is obvious. If someone has chosen manipulation, you don't fix them with perfect words. You walk away, not because you're cruel, because you're clear. Truth doesn't need to be chased. Truth doesn't need to be begged for. Truth doesn't require mental gymnastics. Truth is simple. It doesn't hide. It doesn't distort. It doesn't make you doubt your memory. It doesn't punish your questions. So if your relationship requires you to become a detective just to feel stable, the relationship is already broken. Deception is a character issue, not a quirk. A lot of people minimize lying by calling it a habit. They just avoid conflict. They're insecure. They had a hard childhood. They don't know how to communicate. They don't mean harm. Listen, some of those may be true. But the Stoic response is, understanding is not the same as allowing. Yes, chronic liars often lie out of fear. Fear of consequences, fear of being seen, fear of losing control. In modern psychology, many people lie to protect an image or avoid accountability, and some do it to maintain power. But even if you understand the reason, the effect on you is the same. You live in confusion, and confusion is not peace. Empathy doesn't mean you accept psychological erosion, because repeated deception doesn't just annoy you, it slowly destroys your confidence in your own reality. And if someone repeatedly makes you question your memory, your intuition, your interpretation, ask yourself honestly, or is that damage? Because everyone lies a little becomes a dangerous excuse when the lying is constant, strategic, and reality warping. The Stoic move: clarity over confrontation. It's clarity. You don't need to convince them they're wrong. You don't need the perfect confession. Because if you require their validation to trust your own perception, you remain trapped. So Stoicism trains you to rely on what you can control: your judgment, your standards, your boundaries. And then you protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And if you're still stuck on the forgiveness question, here's the Stoic filter. Or because they got exposed. Are they changing consistently? Or are they behaving until the pressure fades? Because forgiving deception without change isn't virtue, and you deserve better. Final takeaway: in a world of illusion, your power is clarity. When deception enters your life, the greatest danger isn't the lie itself. The greatest danger is what the lie does to your mind. It makes you over-explain. It makes you shrink. So your power is not in winning an argument with a liar. Your power is in refusing to live in a reality they designed. Your strength is in discernment. And your peace begins the moment you stop explaining your worth to people who built their comfort on your confusion. You don't have to hate them, but you do have to let them go. Because when someone shows you that their loyalty was performance and their honesty was scripted, you don't rewrite the story hoping it becomes true. It's the foundation. Section 5, Betrayal of Trust and Vulnerability, and the quiet Stoic ending. Let's talk about the kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt, because there's betrayal that stings like a slap. Sharp, sudden, humiliating. And then there's betrayal that haunts, the kind that follows you into quiet rooms, the kind you feel in your chest when you're alone, the kind that doesn't need to scream because it already lives inside your nervous system. This is the betrayal of trust, not the casual kind of trust, like lending someone money or believing they'll show up on time. I'm talking about the invisible kind, the foundational kind, the kind where you hand someone your story, your fears, your dreams, the fragile parts of you, and you believe, without hesitation, that they'll protect it. Not because you demanded it, but because you thought they had the character to honor it. And when that trust isn't just chipped, but shattered, when someone breaks it after you've been vulnerable, something changes in the way you walk through life. It doesn't just hurt your feelings, it rewires your sense of safety. Suddenly, things that once felt solid feel hollow. Conversations feel rehearsed, warmth feels suspicious. Even normal moments start to carry a question mark. You can be smiling and still scanning. You can be present and still bracing, not because you want to live like that, but because your mind learned what it costs to be wrong. And here's the truth most people avoid. Some forms of betrayal can't be undone. You can cover them in apologies, you can put time on top of them, you can attempt to start fresh. But deep down you still hear it, the crack in the foundation. You step on it and it creaks. You lean on it and it shifts. Because once trust breaks at the root, it doesn't just heal like skin, it changes shape. It leaves a scar that reminds you of the moment you learned. It affects how you see everything. You begin to hold people at arm's length, not because you're cold, but because you've experienced the cost of being open with the wrong person. You become more careful with what you share, more aware of what you reveal. You start asking questions you never used to ask. Are they sincere? Are they consistent? Do they mean what they say? Is this safe? This is why Stoicism doesn't treat betrayal like a simple emotional inconvenience. Stoicism treats betrayal as a moment of truth. The Lance Armstrong example, when trust breaks publicly, it still feels personal. Think of Lance Armstrong. For years, he wasn't just an athlete. He was a symbol, a story, a man people used as proof that humans can overcome the impossible, a cancer survivor turned champion. Millions didn't just admire him. So when the truth came out that he'd been deceiving the sport for years, the betrayal wasn't simply cheating, it was the collapse of trust. It was the realization that the image was built on performance, not truth. That the story people used to inspire themselves was anchored to deception. And notice what happened after. No apology could rebuild that bond the way it was. Not because people are unforgiving, but because trust doesn't work like that. When deception is repeated and intentional, the damage isn't just emotional, it's structural. That's how betrayal works in personal life too. Sometimes you can forgive a mistake, but you can't unsee a pattern. Stoic truth. Not every wound needs a bandage, some need boundaries. This is where Stoicism gives you something modern culture often refuses to give you. Stoicism doesn't preach blind forgiveness. It doesn't tell you to sacrifice your dignity to look spiritually enlightened. Stoicism tells you to protect what is most precious, your inner peace, your clarity, your character. Seneca wrote something that sounds harsh at first, but becomes freeing when you really understand it. He who spares the guilty punishes the innocent. Think about what that means in real life. When you keep someone close who has already proven they will hurt you, when you invite them back into your life without accountability, without change, you aren't just being kind. You're punishing the innocent part of you. The part of you that still believes in love, the part of you that still hopes people will be honorable. That part of you gets punished every time you overlook a betrayal just to avoid discomfort. And Stoicism is allergic to self-betrayal. It teaches you to be compassionate without becoming careless. to be kind without becoming available to harm. Second chances aren't always wisdom, but Stoicism is not built on sometimes. Stoicism is built on reality. And reality says, people show you who they are through patterns. Words are cheap, tears are easy, promises are convenient in the moment, but character shows up when it costs something. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to scorch the earth. You have to draw the line and mean it, because if you don't, you'll get trapped in a loop. The real cost isn't only the pain of what happened, it's the daily tax you pay afterward. The overthinking, the suspicion, the second-guessing, the quiet anxiety behind normal interactions, the way you interrogate every smile, every delay, every detail. That is not living. And if you're living like that, you're not rebuilding peace, you're living inside a warning signal. So here's the Stoic stance. If someone broke your trust at the root, it isn't your responsibility to rebuild the bridge alone. Not dramatically, not loudly. The betrayal that cuts deepest, weaponizing vulnerability. Now we need to talk about the deepest kind of betrayal, because it's different from lying or gossip or disloyalty. This betrayal happens in sacred places, in private conversations, in soft moments, in the darkness where you finally open up. It's when you share the parts of yourself you don't share with the world, your scars, your secrets, the childhood wounds you only whispered to someone because you believed you were safe. And then, when the relationship cracks, when tension rises, when they're angry, when they want power, they take those truths and throw them at you like knives. Maybe it happens in an argument, maybe it's done publicly, maybe it's a cold sentence said at the perfect moment, aimed at the exact spot you revealed. And that is the betrayal of vulnerability. It doesn't just break trust, it breaks intimacy. Because intimacy is built on safety. And once someone proves they'll use your pain for leverage, safety is gone. Epictetus said something that should be tattooed on the mind. You must guard your inner life. Because not everyone is safe enough to receive your truth. But the truth is, vulnerability is a risk. And in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon pointed back at your soul. And let me be clear, that's not a fight that went too far. That's a character revelation. In many cases, it's emotional abuse. And this is why Stoicism does not tell you to keep forgiving this kind of betrayal. Because staying in proximity to someone who weaponizes your vulnerability is like handing them a map of your most sensitive terrain and pretending they won't invade again. They will. Not because you're weak, but because they already proved what they're capable of when they're threatened. So the Stoic response isn't rage, it isn't revenge, it's removal. You just walk away, with your dignity intact, with your soul protected. What if they change? People always ask that. And it sounds noble, but sometimes it's just fear dressed up as hope. Ask yourself a sharper question. Do you want to spend the next chapter of your life hoping someone won't stab you in the same wound twice? Because here is the truth. Not everyone deserves access to your scars. Not everyone should be allowed behind the walls you built for a reason. Vulnerability is sacred, but only in the hands of someone who treats it that way. It wasn't your fault. You weren't wrong to trust. You weren't wrong to open up. The betrayal says something about them, not about the value of your heart. But now you know. You rebuild boundaries. You protect your peace. You make your inner life a fortress of clarity. You had access to the deepest parts of me, and you lost the privilege. That's not bitterness. The ending, betrayal, can build you if you let it. So after everything we've walked through, the lies, the disloyalty, the deception, the broken trust, the weaponized vulnerability, here's what I want to leave you with. Betrayal may break you for a moment, but it can build you for a lifetime. It hurts. There's no denying it. When someone turns on you, especially someone you once trusted, the pain is intimate. It feels personal because it is personal. And the wound doesn't stay in the past. It changes how you love, how you listen, how you open your heart again. We're taught that forgiveness is always the highest form of healing, that strength means always giving another chance. But that isn't always true. Sometimes forgiving someone who chose to hurt you isn't strength, it's self-betrayal. Because if forgiveness requires you to silence your inner voice, dismiss your dignity, or sacrifice your peace just to keep the peace, that's not healing. That's surrender. The Stoics understood this long before we had words like boundaries and trauma recovery. Their wisdom was simple. Protect your peace. Guard your soul. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And that's what betrayal can give you if you let it. Not bitterness, clarity, not hatred, discernment. Not revenge, quiet resolve. A promise to yourself, no one gets to treat your heart like it's disposable again. So if you're carrying betrayal, whether it came from a partner, a friend, a family member, a colleague, or even from your own decisions, I want you to know this. You're allowed to stop explaining, because the strongest move isn't slamming the door. It's closing it quietly and never reopening it. That's Stoic strength. Not becoming cold, becoming clear. Not hardening your heart, protecting it with wisdom. Can you build a life where your peace is protected, your boundaries are honored, and your truth is respected, even if it means releasing people who once felt essential? Because the real victory isn't keeping a connection that cost you your self-worth. The real victory is standing in your own life, whole, grounded, unapologetically true to yourself. Let go of the fantasy that they'll wake up and realize what they lost. That's their path. Your path is home, back to your values, back to your standards, back to your steady strength. Your job is to protect it like it's priceless, because it is. You don't need revenge. You don't need the perfect apology. You don't need them to get it. You just need to keep walking, not away from them, toward yourself. If this message helped you, let it echo. Like, share, subscribe, and keep building your inner strength.